Thank you, Dustin, and did it again. Yes, I heard the little voice there. I forgot to push record again. Dustin there is watching out for me. He was just up here a minute ago. Okay, burden to buyer, burden to seller. Okay, so there's that. Okay, see, this is what I meant a minute ago when I said about the reality check. Did it register to you to use this ratio equals ratio to find this one? See, that's the thing on the exam where things don't register because you didn't prepare the right way or do the right things. Okay, so maybe it registered to you and you said, well, okay, I think this is what I need to do. This has to be this elasticity of supply versus elasticity of demand thing. Okay, and let's see what we say this was. Okay, that was given to be minus 1. Okay, here's the thing we're trying to find. Okay, what's the burden to the buyer according to the graph up there? Well, let's see. The $6 tax increases the price from 16 to 12. Okay, so there's the burden to the buyer, 16 minus 12. Okay, and then you subtract off the tax. So the burden to the seller, okay, subtract off the $6 tax from the new price. You get the net to the seller. Okay, compare that to the old price. So the burden to the seller is that. So 4 over 2 has to be the same thing, which is 2, has to be the same as this ratio. Whoops. No minus sign. E sub s is a positive. Okay. All right. This is supposed to be a good starting point for Q&A. Getting close to that exam. Are you thinking about what went wrong last time? What went right? Going to fix what went wrong? Yes?
Where do you get that 16 from?
That's the new equilibrium price with S1.
How does it jump to S1?
The $6 tax takes you from S0 to S1. It goes up by $6.
So there's the 12, and so you look at S1 for...
So you see the S0 starts at 6. Okay, so with the imposition of the tax, any given quantity will cost $6 more than it did before. So the S1 starts at 12 and it's parallel. So that any given quantity, the S1 is $6 above S0. Billy. If you take the new equilibrium price of 16, you subtract off the tax, which is $6, that's what the seller gets to keep. Okay, they collect $16 from the buyer. Okay, and 6 of that belongs to the government because that's the tax rate. So the 10 is their net. Okay, and that's what we've been calling it, the net price. Well, good. This is a good starting point question because there are some key things here that needed to be clarified, and I'm really, really sure that it didn't need to be clarified just for them. Appreciate your questions on behalf of others who, for whatever reason, are going to stay silent no matter what the cost to them. Yeah, you get lucky sometimes. Somebody else asks your question, but occasionally you might want to ask it yourself in case no one else does. Yes, it worked. I got another question. Yes. Taking the new price of 16 and subtracting off the tax, which is $6. In the question it says, what if there's a $6 tax? That shifts the line by $6. But the new equilibrium price in the short run is not going to be $6 higher than it was before. See, in the attempt to pass on the full tax, they create a surplus, okay, and then the price comes back down some. So that in the short run, the buyers and the sellers share the burden of the tax, right? 2/3 of the burden goes on the buyer because 2/3 of the $6 is on the buyer and 1/3 of it, 2 out of 6, is on the seller. Now, let me review that again. There's an immediate effect of the tax. There's a short-run effect, and then there's a long-run effect. The immediate effect is for the price to go up by the amount of the tax. Okay? Okay, so the immediate effect here will be for the price to go from 12 to 18. Okay, because the initial price is 12 with S0. Okay, but at 18, the buyers don't want to buy the same amount that the sellers want to sell. So that's not an equilibrium. Okay, so that immediate effect of raising the price creates a surplus, and that brings the price back down, in this case, to 16. Okay, that's the short run effect. The buyers and the sellers share the burden of the tax And they don't share it 50-50. It depends on this ratio, the elasticity of supply divided by the elasticity of demand. Okay, and then there's the long run effect, which is now that we've driven down the profitability of selling this good, because now the net price to the seller is 10 instead of 12, some of the sellers say, bye-bye, I'm out of here. Looks better elsewhere. This new profitability is not okay with me. I'm going to go do something else. So when they do that, that further shifts the supply to the left, restoring eventually the old level of normal profitability. Okay, so in the long run, the buyers bear all the burden of the tax. More Q&A. That's why we're here. Okay, all the information's already in your book and on these PowerPoint slides, et cetera, et cetera. A couple of really good things that I attached to the Chapter 7, content in BB Learn. A Milton Friedman story on the pencil, and then something from your authors regarding the ramifications of there being less sawdust because there's less home building. Read those. That'll give you some real insight on how these markets are connected. Question? Say that a little louder. Oh, well, because the question specified that there was a $6 tax. Okay, the S0 is no tax. Okay, and so then the shift will be the amount of the tax. So it'll shift up by 6, which means it'll start at 12 instead of 6. Now, if it had been the $12 tax, then it would have shifted all the way to S2. Okay, or if you start at S1 and there's already a $6 tax, and you put on another $6, then it'll shift from S1 to S2. Wow, this is going to be a good day. More questions, because that's more important than me lecturing. It really is. Okay, again, all the material is already there. Okay, tell me what it is about the material that you don't understand. And hopefully we'll get it clarified. Clarification, as we say in Cajun land. Yeah, the burden to the buyers will be higher to the degree to which the price elasticity of demand is low compared to the price elasticity of supply. Oh. No, it's equal to ES divided by E sub D. And this was specified in the equation as being -1. Okay, so it isn't just automatically -1. I said it was. Maybe you might have, the question's no longer on the screen, so you might have overlooked that. Okay, because for example, I might on the exam say, suppose the elasticity of demand is -3. You have to put it, and then the elasticity of supply would be 6 in this case. Oh, no. That's the ratio has to be the same. Yeah, the ratio on the right has to be the same as the ratio on the left. Okay, so if the elasticity, see the cause and effect runs this way. If the elasticity of supply is twice as high as the elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand, then the burden to the buyers will be twice as big as the burden to the sellers, which means the price will rise by 2/3 of the tax. Okay. Good, more clarification. Wow, this is really cool. This is continuing. Yeah. Because I'm trying to say it in a different way. Why is the buyer get by 2/3 of the tax? Because according to the elasticities, their burden will be twice what the burden to the buyers is. 2/3 is twice 1/3. See, I'm saying that hesitatingly because I don't think that's what you're not getting. Try it again, because I'm not getting what you're not getting. But see, that's why we're here, to figure that out. I got the 2/3 because this one is twice as big as this. Okay? So these two things have to add to 100%, and this one has to be twice this one. Okay? So 2/3 and 1/3 adds to 100%. Okay? So we keep trying. So that was a thumbs up, right? We didn't use the thumbs up yet today, but I presume, I'm guessing from all of you that it got to that point. Looking around to those who asked. More. More Q&A. All right, let's move on then, because we have one more before we're going to do the get into chapter 7. All right, and oops, let me make sure that drops into your box so you can ponder that one some more later on if you wish. All right, and here's the remaining one. See, now we're jumping to a subsidy. So beware, the graph looks similar because I was lazy in redrawing it. All I did was change S0 to S2 and S2 to S0. Same numbers other than that. But now the S0 is the upper one. Okay, and then the subsidy shifts the supply. And in case you haven't discovered on your device, you can click on the graph so you can look at it on your device rather than up here where you can't see it. Which might help to bring a bigger device sometimes. It's a little bitty graph on the phone, but oh well. It's also, you're doing marginal analysis. Yeah, bring a bigger device. I got to schlep it around all day long. So you're thinking, nah, stick with the phone. Now the board has hints on it now that I did the other one. See, there's a degree of symmetry in economics. Okay, and as you do each one of these and discover getting it right and getting it wrong, kind of introspect back on how you could have been better prepared and what you need to do 9 days from today to be better prepared. What about it made you struggle? Oh, you didn't know what that meant. You didn't know what that meant. Says something about the prep process. Okay, I see the blue bars moving across. I'll have to do my marginal analysis here in a minute and say, enough of that. Additional answers are not worth the additional time cost. See, that's the marginal analysis part. All right, there we go. So let's pop this up here. All right, so again, the S0, the starting point without the subsidy, without the tax, is up on the top now. And the $12 subsidy shifts the supply by $12, okay, but in the other direction now. So now the bottom supply line, the one that starts at 6, is the supply, and the new equilibrium is $12, okay, and that's the price to the buyers. What was the price to the buyers before that? Okay, it was 20. Okay, now it's 12. Okay, now the seller gets the subsidy, right? So what's the price going to be after the seller says, subsidy please? 24, right? So they gain from the subsidy too, right? Then the price to the buyer is 12, but then the seller says, hey, government, you promised 12 bucks a shot here. Okay, so their benefit is going to be, okay, they were getting 20. Now they'll be getting 24. Okay, so I pushed the wrong button. Yes, that's 2 again. How did I do that? It is 2. Yeah, it's still 2. And it should be still 2, right? Because it's the same demand line and supply line with the same slope. What made me push the 3 there? All right, so should be 2. It even highlighted there for me after I clicked it a couple times, show my frustration. Okay, now see, you got it upside down there, not 0.5, 0.2. The benefit to the buyer is twice the benefit to the seller. 8 versus 4. You know what happened is that the default is A. If you don't change it, it stays at A. I forgot to click the other choice. Okay, I will do that before I shift that onto your file so you don't get confused. So I won't click orange on this one yet for you to review it, but I will later. Before I do that, I'll change the official answer to the right one, which is 2. Yes?
Would the bottom be 24 minus 12 because there's $12 equilibrium?
No. But the benefit to the seller is in comparison to the original equilibrium. See, the seller wouldn't supply all this additional stuff unless they were making more money. Right? Because their opportunity costs, the supply line, their opportunity costs go up with quantity. Okay, so yeah, they're only selling it for $12, but then they get the subsidy, which makes them better off than they were before. 24 versus 20. Okay, and we look around and make sure it's okay with everybody else. Okay, they collect the $12 from the buyer, and then they say, well, I wouldn't be selling all this stuff at $12 unless there was this subsidy. And so then they're better off than before. The $12 charge to the buyer plus the subsidy makes them $24, which is $4 better than they were before. Eric?
Oh, I was just going to ask about 24 and where it came from.
The $12 price plus the 12. Too many 12s and 6s here, I agree. I should probably redo my example with some different numbers to have fewer 12s and 6s involved. But mm-hmm. Okay, so the new price of 12 plus the subsidy is what the seller gets, which is $4 better than what they got before, which is why they do it, right? Otherwise they wouldn't increase production. Oops. All right. All right, this brings us to our first slide, other than the one for the title of the chapter, for which I've drawn a couple of graphs up here just to get you kind of rolling here. You see an arrow with the ... says the ripple effects will continue. Until I read this chapter, I didn't realize there was so much involved when I give my wife a dozen roses or something like that. I didn't realize they came from Kenya. Wow. No, and I understand now why they're so expensive. What I don't understand, although I'm sure there's some reason, like comparative advantage, is why someone closer than Kenya doesn't figure out a way to grow flowers and thus undersell them and take their market from them. The Kenyans must have quite a comparative advantage in mass growing flowers for Valentine, even though they have to be shipped across the earth in just a couple of days to not wilt and still look nice in time for the magic moment. Okay, so let's just kind of show how this is connected by, I don't know how many graphs we can draw. We can draw as many as you want. But suppose for whatever reason the flowers become less of a preferred item on Valentine's Day. Shock too, I suppose. Okay, so that would decrease the demand for those roses over in Kenya. Okay, so there's a surplus at the old price. Kenyans can't sell all the flowers that they had ready to sell at the old price. So in order to keep those flowers from just wilting on spot to get them shipped, well, they cut their prices. Okay, so the new equilibrium is P1. Some of the farmers over in Kenya notice that and think, not sure how much they would go online to research the underlying cause and whether that's likely to be permanent and whether to take that into account for next year. But suppose they just say, oh, wow, the price is lower, and they compare that to their other options. And I went online this morning and getting ready for class. Says, what else do they grow in Kenya other than flowers? Well, a bunch of other stuff, but one of the things that came up with potatoes. Okay? Potatoes and roses are what? Production substitutes. Right? You don't eat or use or give as a Valentine's gift potatoes instead of roses. Right? That wouldn't go over very big, right? Here's a bag of potatoes. Okay? So they're not consumption substitutes, right? They're production substitutes. So let's see. As a result of this over here, what would happen over here? It would look more attractive to grow potatoes than it did prior to this shift. Right? So that would increase the supply of potatoes. And so us meat and potato lovers would say, wonder why the potatoes are cheaper at the grocery store this week. Or it'll take longer than a week for that to ripple through the system. It would be because flowers are no longer as desired over Valentine's Day. Or a story that I've often told, why are turkey breasts and other body parts other than drumsticks cheaper after Fiesta? Because they're production complements for turkey drumsticks, which are sold everywhere at Fiesta events, right? You cannot produce turkey drumsticks unless you produce a whole turkey, which are all the other parts. Okay? So the increased demand for turkey drumsticks increases the supply of other turkey parts. So if you're a white meat lover, be ready after Fiesta, right? Because that'll be bargain time for the non-drumstick part of the turkey. Now, will it be a lot cheaper here? Because this is because here's one of the places where there's that increased demand. Probably not a lot cheaper because they can ship the other parts of the turkey all over the world or all over the country at least, but a little bit cheaper. Okay, and you can see all the other things on the slide that are connected to getting those flowers here on time, looking good, from a place over in Africa to a flower shop near you here in San Antonio. Okay, and a lot of non-economists, even us economists, do find it amazing the degree to which there's connectedness to these markets and how fast these prices ripple through from one market to the next without anybody having to tell anybody anything. It looks like chaos. But it's much less chaotic, actually, when you finally look at the result of the alternative being central command economy planning. That ultimately looks a lot more chaotic than what I call decentralized planning through the price system. See, that's what the coordination mechanism among these markets and among the ones listed on the slide. It's decentralized planning through the price system. Now others, including I think your book in one place, calls it non-planning. No, I think it's better called decentralized planning. Because see, everybody's making their own plan, right? Decentralized means independent. All the buyers and sellers are independent. And one thing that you can count on is buyers are looking for bargains and sellers are looking to make a profit. See, and then the price system and price changes as a result of shifts guides that search, pushes people to buy things in greater quantity when the price is down and to produce more of something when the price is up, all else equal. Okay? Decentralized planning through the price system is what's going on, and it beats the heck out of any result anybody anywhere has ever achieved through central planning. And it's all voluntary, but it's all self-interested. I don't even know if do they celebrate Valentine's Day in Kenya? I doubt it. They know there's something special about February 14th, but not gift-giving time to their significant other, I don't think, in Kenya, but they know, boy, a couple days before that, they better have a bunch of flowers ready. Okay? Out of their self-interest, because that's the day on which they can sell it at a very attractive price. That's what they care about. Okay, so we get immense cooperation, voluntary and undirected, out of pure self-interest. That's that invisible hand thing. And people are guided to do good for others by trying to do good for themselves, trying to make a buck, or on the buyer side, trying to find the best deal available. Okay, it says here. Literally millions of people are involved in bringing that gift to market. Fortunately, there's millions of the gift, right? Because that makes it pay for them. And like the Milton Friedman story on the pencil, there are people from all over the world involved in making a single pencil. A little bit of rubber from here, a little bit of metal from there, some graphite from the other end of the earth, some wood from the Pacific Northwest. All that comes together in a way that somebody can make a profit selling it for 15 to 25 cents. Pretty amazing. Okay, so here's the, for example, what else does this affect? Well, how about potatoes grown in Maine? Right, Maine in the United States, that's a big potato place, so is Idaho. Right, so that'll decrease the price. This is a consumption substitute for the stuff they grow in Maine and in Idaho. Okay, so that'll reduce the demand for those. And then the folks in Maine and Idaho will do the marginal analysis thing and think, maybe I won't plant so many potatoes next year, I'll plant something else that for whatever reason is either held steady in terms of price or gone up in price. All this happens naturally without anybody commanding anything to anybody. So it's labor unintensive. Price controls and central planning are very labor intensive because there's a lot of information to gather and a lot of enforcement to do. It takes thousands of people to do badly what the price system does with no one. Okay, with just people pursuing their own self-interest. Here's an example of an intervention which, as far as I can tell, hasn't done much good in terms of petroleum markets. I've read stories that say it takes more energy to make ethanol than is contained in ethanol. And at the same time, it's driven up the price of corn, which has driven up the price of things made from corn, which has been disastrous in some places. I wonder why the subsidy continues. Here's some more marginal analysis. Let's see, what's the first primary caucus in the United States if you want to run for president? You better show well in Iowa, right? And guess what grows in Iowa? Corn. So you want to mess with a program that would lower corn prices? Pretty hazardous to your political health to do that, right? So you go through your Iowa caucuses and you do your Q&A with the voters there and you're running for president. You're going to be asked, Mr. President or Mr. Potential President, what do you think about those corn subsidies, for ethanol? I love them. Wanting to get votes, right? What if you say, they're, inefficient, the economic analysis, no, not looking very good. Drives up food prices, hasn't helped much with gasoline. There went your presidential ambitions, right? Say a little political marginal, are they expensive? Not so much so. John McCain, give the man credit, back in 2008 when he was running for president, the one government program that he named that he would cut was at the ethanol subsidies. Try to get a politician to name a program they would cut. Not likely to get a straight answer because they know it'll cost them votes every time they name one, right? The benefits of each of these spending programs are concentrated on a relatively few people, but they'll vote on that. The benefits of cutting the program, right, is spread over 300 and something million taxpayers. Are you going to change who you vote for because you saved a dime on a cob of corn? I kind of doubt it. Okay, so a little bit of marginal analysis tells us why some of these things are a disaster from an efficiency perspective, but they persist because they are useful from a political perspective. As you study something like this, are you going to read and memorize it? It's a total waste of time. Are you going to get out your graph paper, which, good idea to have some graph paper. Just regular paper's all right too, I suppose, but graph paper's better. And draw some connections. Maybe look at this slide later on and draw the first slide, or the first graph, corn. Okay, what's going to happen with the ethanol subsidy? Oh, that'll increase the demand for corn. How can that be bad? Well, let's just go ahead and do one of those. And then you can trace it out from there because you need to do it more than you need to watch me doing it. But okay, so here's S0, pre-ethanol subsidy. Okay, so here's the price. Okay, so now the government program comes along and says, okay, we're going to pay you big bucks for supplying more ethanol. That increases the demand for corn. At this new price, the old demands for corn are reduced by the higher price. Okay? So this here is what's going into ethanol production. Okay? And so with less corn available and at a higher price, things made from corn will be affected. Okay? There'll be a reduced supply of things made from corn because of the higher price and the reduced quantity. Okay, Q0 net, that amount of Q0 is still used for whatever the original quantity was used for. Okay, and so then you would project that into graphs showing production substitutes, graphs showing consumption substitutes, graphs showing things made from corn. All as a way to get your brain used to drawing graphs and thinking about graphs, because remember, economists do it with models. Okay, and that's how we think through things and illustrate things. I almost got a snicker out of a couple people there with my attempt at humor. Oh well, I keep trying. Another great example. Do read this article posted at this website. Sorry, I tried to click on here. It doesn't work. But you can copy and paste it into your browser and put sawdust in the search box. You'll come up with an interesting article that said a lot of industries are struggling after the housing crash in 2009 because there's not as much as much sawdust available because not as many homes are being built. Sawdust is used, it's a byproduct of building homes, mostly, of making lumber, just mostly for making homes. But now that it's less available and thus much, much more expensive back in 2009, 2010, a lot of industries suffered as a result. Used sawdust for bedding, used it for other construction materials, bedding for animals. Those are all struggling to find useful alternatives. I was surprised by how many things that it was useful for, especially given the chemicals that are often in the wood that's used for lumber. Maybe the sawdust is mostly pre-wood treatment. Okay, central planning. You know, communism got off to a good start about 100 years ago because it seemed like central planning was a smart thing to do. The price system, free enterprise, looks like chaos to most people because everybody's just kind of doing their own thing. It's just freedom in action. People looking at prices, deciding what to buy and what to make a living producing. So they said, why don't we just get rid of this nonsense of this chaos and just have the government, through experts in different industries, decide what to produce and how to produce it. You know, the eternal economic questions, what, how, and where, and for whom are we going to produce it, and we'll just do that centrally, and we'll do it through our accountable politicians. See, there's another word, accountable. See, to most people, unless you vote on it, there's no accountability. There's much more accountability through the price system and through your ability to either buy something or not buy it or produce it or not produce it than there is through who you can vote for or not vote for. But anyway, the thinking back then was, and still is to some extent in some places, that if we have political accountability, we won't have all these greedy entrepreneurs and monopolists and so on shaking us down for big bucks. Well, they were just charging according to the market equilibrium in most cases. Yes, it wasn't as competitive as it could be in some cases, and people were making so-called obscene profits. Why were they doing that? Well, because there were barriers to entry. So-called obscene profits survive in some industries for a while at least, because those trying to get in to sell at the attractive price and thus push down the price can't, because there's some hindrance to them getting into that market. Licensing, permitting. I read a statistic recently that said 1/3 of the jobs in our economy now require some kind of certification, licensing, or permitting. It used to be just 6%. So now you have to ask for permission, somebody's permission and formal approval to do 1/3 of the things that you can have a job to do out there. Gosh, I wonder if somebody might want to influence those restrictions. Like the people in the business already might just kind of want to slow the trickle of new competitors into their business. I think so, and yeah, indeed they do. And that's where a lot of the licensing for things like beauticians and cosmetologists and such comes from. You're probably not going to severely hurt or damage somebody by messing up their haircut or their fingernail cutting, but nevertheless, it's one of those licensed occupations now, and it has slowed down the entry into that profession, and it has driven up prices in those professions over what they would otherwise would be. Interior decorators, I think, is another permitted or licensed area. All right, anyway, I'm off on a little sidetrack here. I'm back to central planning. Why doesn't it work? Why does it sound good, and it's actually a total disaster? North Korea and Cuba still do central planning. China does a little bit, but they gave up on it. Okay, so why is it such a disaster? Well, let's see. It's a command economy. How do you decide what to command each industry to do? Or how to do it? How many workers versus how many machines and which machines, and wow, a lot of questions to ask. Well, you try to gauge the capability of that industry. And how do you gauge the capability of the industry to do what you're going to command it to do? Well, you have to gather information from the people in the industry. They have an incentive to understate their ability, because the more you think that they're capable of as a central planner, the more you're going to make them do, the harder you're going to make them work. So they have an incentive, we need a lot more resources, and a lot of our factories are kind of old, and no, don't assign us too big of a quota to produce. We're going to really struggle to do that. Okay? So the incentive system, as it says there at the bottom, one of the problems is the incentives is just all backwards. Instead of stating how great you're going to be and how good you can do things and how good you are at things in the free enterprise system, right? All the commercials you see, we're the best and we're the greatest and we can provide you awesome service and so on. Instead, communicating to the central planner, the producers have an incentive to vastly understate and to downplay what they're able to do. And even now in our system, if somebody thinks that an industry should be regulated, they're reliant on the people in the industry for the information upon which those regulations are based, which is why economists have come up with something called the theory of capture. Some of us know it better by the revolving door. If somebody's in the business of regulating, they're kind of dependent on those they're regulating for information, and then once they leave government, I wonder where they end up being employed. By the people they used to regulate. I wonder why they got so friendly and chummy. Well, because they were nice to them while regulating them, right? Knowing that that's where their future job opportunities were going to be had. Okay, so even the central planning that we have now, much smaller in scope, thankfully, than what used to go on in the Soviet Union and China and what still goes on in North Korea and Cuba, the central planning still shows all of those same bad symptoms of problems with incentives and problems collecting the right information, the accurate information from those who are about to be imposed upon, commanded upon to either do or not do something, regulation, or to produce more of something. Let me give you another example of how it got messed up. And there was a story in the old Soviet Union where the Politburo was trying to figure out how much glass to produce. And so they figured it out to their satisfaction, and they said, okay, produce 20,000 cubic meters of glass. So they got these big, thick slabs of glass, okay, that nobody could do anything with, but they added up to the quantity that they were supposed to get. Whoops. They didn't see the thing was it's too complicated to specify all the different kinds of glass that would be needed out there in the economy. Right? The central planner didn't know that some of it had to be this thick and some of it had to be that thick and some of it had to be stronger and weaker and some of it had to be kind of darker and lighter. No, they just said, here's how much glass we want. They needed to command it all into the most excruciating detail. Have you ever wondered why government legislation sometimes is like 2,000 pages to do something that sounds kind of simple? Well, because they've got to cover all of those what ifs and wherefores, and if somebody does this, then this will happen, and if that happens, and pretty soon, you want to command something, you better command it in excruciating detail, or you're going to get some pretty wacky results. Anyway, so back to the story of the Soviet Union. They said, oops, we shouldn't have commanded it by that, so how about we command it in terms of tonnage? You can imagine what they got out of that. And how about we command it in terms of square feet of glass? And the glass was so thin to do that, when that was the command, that a stiff breeze and it would just shatter into a million pieces, right? Because the incentive there was to make as much area of glass out of as little glass as possible. It's amazing how our system mostly gets the incentives right by keeping expert planners out of it rather than putting them in the process. Again, it does seem like, well, how can we be worse off by putting expert planners in a command position. Yeah, you can be a lot worse off. Google Korea at night sometime for a quick visual on that. Yeah, you'll get a satellite photo that shows the northern half, the North Korea part of the peninsula will be black. No night lights on because they're poor. And then the southern half where they have free enterprise, capitalism is lit up like a Christmas tree. Some people say, well, yeah, not very environmentally friendly. Well, it's a different story. It's mostly because of a wealth differential, almost exclusively. That's the difference. Okay, so again, what I've just been saying here, free markets accomplish the task of allocating resources without any central planning or control, and thus freedom is the operative force rather than command and control. That's the other, probably biggest advantage of free markets, is they operate based on freedom, orchestrated, planned in a sense, incentivized by changing prices. As your book says periodically, a price is a signal wrapped in an incentive. I might say, did I get that backwards? Yeah, I think a signal wrapped in an incentive. Anyway, a combination of the two. I've seen it enough, and now I can't remember which way it says. But anyway, the key words there, prices signal where bargains are and where profitability is. And in the process, they provide an incentive to go there because higher prices mean bigger bucks. And lower prices mean better deals and the ability to have money left over to buy more other stuff. Okay? A price contains a phenomenal amount of information. A lot of information, all packaged into one single number. Okay? Consumers will purchase a good only if its value is greater than the price, right? You're free to make the comparison. There it is, the going rate from the market. You want it, pay this price. If it's not worth it to you to do that, then you can get to spend your money on something else. You get to choose. If the price is too high from your perspective, and maybe it's too high from a lot of people's perspective because the sellers have formed a cartel and they're trying to raise the price and selling it for more money, well, then you have the freedom to walk away and not buy it or buy it from someone else. And then the seller says, oops, we haven't sold our output. If it's perishable, then they're really in deep doo-doo, as a former president once said. If it's not perishable, at least they can mark the price down and still sell it. Okay, and this is the production substitute thing. Or, I'm sorry, the consumption substitute thing. Okay, and then the sellers make the same comparison. What can I use my resources to produce? One of the things that I thought of as I looked at this slide before class, as I thought of an interesting issue that pertains to this is the issue of bankruptcy. Because what is a bankruptcy conveying? Literally, yeah, you don't have enough money to pay your bills. Why is that? Well, because the value of your output is less than the opportunity cost of your inputs. Right? Bankruptcy is saying that you're not putting those resources, the ones in your business, to the highest value use. Somebody is outbidding you for them. Right? You can't pay your bills. Bankruptcy. Okay? Why can't you pay your bills? Because the value of your service or good is not sufficient to overcome the opportunity cost, taking the resources from other sectors of the economy and putting them into your business. Okay? The value of your goods and services is not enough. So it's a brutal process. Like, sorry, you're not covering the opportunity cost of these resources as indicated by their market prices. Bye-bye. You're out of business. Okay, market price and opportunity cost. Here's our familiar graph. Okay. Think of the market price like a hurdle, like the ones that the runners jump over, like in the Olympics. If your wishes and desires, the value of your uses, are more valuable than the market price, you'll be in that upper half of your demand line, these satisfied wants. Now, there are other wants of lesser value to the person with them, right? You get to decide how valuable your wants are. You have limited resources, and you get to decide how to allocate them. To which goods and services are you going to spend your limited funds? Okay, and those things you value the most, You'll overcome that hurdle and you'll pay for it. And you'll have less money to pay for other things. And you'll be on that lower half of the demand curve for a lot of other things. Wow, if it was only cheaper, I'd buy some. That's kind of like me during the off season for peaches. I love peaches, but not enough to spend $2.50 a pound on them, which they often are. Somebody's paying that. I'm sure H-E-B doesn't buy them with the plan of just putting on the shelf and watching them rot. Somebody must be paying the $2.50 a pound or so that peaches cost in the off season. No, not me now. And they're down to $1 a pound, a little plus or minus. I'm there. See, I'm on those unsatisfied demands during much of the year, but when the supply increases during the peak season, lots of peaches around, price goes down enough, I get in there and have my daily peach. I got this big giant peach sitting up on my filing cabinet up in my office right after class to look forward to the half of a giant peach. Okay? But anyway, my willingness to pay is not high enough so that I'll buy them at the prices that prevail in the off season. Okay, and you can see the little jet airplane up there. That's Air Force One, the president's airplane. That's a high willingness to pay use of oil. I almost said high value, but that depends on your view of what the president does when he flies around. Okay, any president. But it's a high willingness to pay because the president decides when he wants to fly around and we pick up the tab. Okay, powerful signals because they're reaching into your pocket, right? Put your money where your mouth is, right? You've heard that phrase. Well, that's just saying, the talk is cheap, right? You want something, reach into your purse or your wallet and pull out the bucks, pay. Okay? So an increase in the price of the good signals to consumers, that's not a bargain anymore, like peaches in the off season. There are other fruits that are now in season. You can switch to those. I love making smoothies. That the ingredients in the smoothies always have bananas in them, but they vary seasonally what the other ingredients are. Okay, so I do change my behavior seasonally quite a bit for my smoothies, among other things. Corn, doggone it, I love corn, but again, I'm one of those users that during certain parts of the year my demand is unsatisfied. Okay? Just lately, I noticed that they went up to 50 cents a piece. A cob of corn at H-E-B or Walmart. No. I could afford it. There's that nasty A word in economics, right? I mean, I can find 50 cents. I just got to spend $2 to have, $1 to have a couple of corn in the cob. No, I'd rather have potatoes or something else. When they're 4 or 5 or 6 for $1, I'm there. Okay, another demonstration of elasticity, right? I spend way more on corn when they're cheap than when they're expensive. Yeah, I'm filling up big old pots and boiling the heck out of that corn, and my wife says, "Oh, corn again." That's over for now, at least, since the price has gone up quite a bit. Okay, and see, there's that conflict. I had one of my graduate classes, a couple of engineers in it, said, "What's all this contradiction in economics?" It's all about contradiction. Every time something happens, there's a benefit and a cost. Okay, that's what meant by the contradiction. You got to do your marginal analysis thing and say, is the additional benefit or the additional cost, worth the downside of that? That's why us economists are sometimes called the dismal scientists, is everything seems to have a downside. Can't we just be unmitigatingly optimistic about something rather than saying, well, but it costs this much? Well, sorry, no, we can't, because everything does have an opportunity cost. Okay, so the same price increase that signals to consumers to economize and use less is telling the suppliers to produce more. So, for example, let's see, I was looking at my graph here. Here's one that has an increase in price. Okay, so at this higher price, okay, here's a shortage, then the price goes up, and at the higher price, as the price is increasing, the quantity demanded is falling, moving towards this point, and the quantity supplied is increasing. So they reach a new equilibrium by one of them increasing and the other one decreasing. So the initial jump must be big, right? Because from there on, there's got to be convergence on a new price and a new quantity. Okay, see, here's the decentralized planning occurring. The price signals and the reason to listen, right? Signals are meaningless. Right? Messages are going out all the time without an incentive to open that email, right? Or consider that text, or to listen to that phone call or pick it up. I don't want to talk to them. I don't want to take that phone call. Okay? Or, that's just junk email. Oh, whoops, wait a minute. It said something about a bunch of money in there. Maybe I better open that one. Whoops, that's a scam. I better delete that one. Okay? So price signals are telling entrepreneurs what to make more of and what to make less of. See, and then a price signal comes along that encourages an entrepreneur to innovate and make something obsolete. There's the real fear in any economy, is something you produce may suddenly become obsolete because somebody found a better way to do this, something similar. Then there's the political process. Think about prices being too high or too low. The price, whatever it is, unless it's in the process of shifting between short run and long run, if it's a stable price, it can't be the equilibrium price unless it's working, unless it's payable by the vast majority, or profitable to the vast majority of producers. Yet there are complaints by those in the lower half of the demand line. Price is too high. It's not fair. Obscene profits are being made. Somebody stop them. Make them charge less. Rent controls, those sorts of things. Okay? Demand from the political process to suppress the signaling process of the economy. Let's just take that as a quick example. Rent control. Doesn't that sound good? We all spend a lot of money on housing, right? Right? If you were not economically astute as you're becoming, and somebody came along and said, we ought to enact a rent control ordinance, a law. Those evil landlords, they're just charging way too much, and you'd have a lot more money jingling around in your pocket if only we'd just pass a law and make them charge less. It's worked in terms of politics in a lot of places. A lot of places have rent controls. So what would that do on one of our graphs? Okay, let's take a quick look at it. Okay, so apartments. And we'd have more of these rent controls if it wasn't so complicated because of this political attractiveness. Right? If all you had to do was go boop, and now your rent is $100 a month lower than otherwise, not too many people would resist that, would they? What's the boop? That's like when I go vote and I push one of the buttons to vote for somebody, the machine goes boop, to register that I pushed one of the buttons. So, boop, to save $100 a month. Whoa, that's almost irresistible. One of the reasons we don't have more rent control ordinances around the country is because, there's a lot of different kinds of apartments, and so it'd be difficult to construct an ordinance to specify what the price of all of them should be. It happens still in some places. Okay, so here's the supply and demand, free anything, any intervention, and then because some of the people on the lower half of the demand line, the unsatisfied consumers, those having to live home with mom and dad because an apartment's too expensive for them, right? But the equilibrium price can't be the equilibrium unless a lot of people are able to pay it, and a lot of sellers, or the vast majority of sellers, are willing to charge it. And up here, of course, the upper part of the supply line, those are unused productive capacity because the opportunity cost is too high. So what happens when enough people go boop, and the law passes, or enough people that support the law get into office and legislate it? The amount of apartments available declines. Oh, didn't think of that. See, everybody has an economic theory in their head, just that isn't all that good sometimes. Right? So the economic theory that a lot of people have in their head is, hey, the supply of apartments is a constant. There they are. People are living in them now. Oh, whoops, they discover it's not a constant. They can be converted to other uses. Okay, or maybe they're kind of getting old and maybe just bulldozed away and something else can be built there in place of them. Whoops. Yeah, the supply line isn't a straight line, a vertical line, it's an upward sloping line. So suddenly it gets a lot harder to find an apartment. Now, some people benefit, right? Those who are in an apartment and stay in it, and the apartment building doesn't change to other uses by the owner of the building. And more people want an apartment at the new, suppressed, lower price. Okay, so there's a shortage of apartments. Now, the resource allocation part of this story gets a little weirder even than this, because ponder the landlord's situation. Many, many applicants per apartment, right? Because there's fewer available and more people want them. And so that means that they don't really have to take very good care of those apartments to rent them all out at the maximum price, P max, at the maximum price allowed. So wait a minute, we have a shortage. If anything, more should be made, or that should be the signal in the central planning world. It's like, okay, there's a shortage, maybe we should make more. But now, in the free enterprise world, but with government control of a price, resources exit a market where there's already a shortage. Let me go over that again. So there's a shortage. It's easy to rent an apartment out if you have one available because there's lots of applicants. There's a shortage of apartments. And so one of the ways to make more money, as well as just neglect, busy, and don't have to keep up the apartments, why bother? But it's another way to make more money, right? Because maintenance costs money, right? So if you don't spend as much money on maintenance, that's a way to make more money rather than charging what the old market price was. Okay? So it's an indirect way to raise the prices to diminish the quality of the product. By the way, that's something that economists do agree upon. When a shortage of something persists, which takes the price control, a price maximum, quality declines. Yeah, and the other thing that happens is there's less of it available than there used to be. Okay? Quality declines. Quality is eroded by shortages. So in a case where the circumstances are screaming for more, the signal breaks down because there isn't the incentive to match it. In fact, the incentive is to take resources out, because that's an indirect way to make more money. Right? Less maintenance, same rent, you make more money. And if it falls apart, oh well, the land probably isn't worth more to do something else. So in many cases, the apartments are just let it deteriorate, charged at the rent control allowed price, and then when the building kind of falls down from lack of maintenance, then they build something else there. But at least while the building still hangs together. Somebody once said about rent controls, they have about the same effect as a nuclear bomb without the radiation. They just destroy whole sections of cities through neglect of the structures. See, because it's no longer worth the investment to maintain the structures at the lower price. Yeah. Timing of these projects, between semesters of the summer, that might be the smart time to do those kind of, but no. Any questions or comments on any of these stories or related things? See, one way to get some of this stuff to stick in your head is to say, Doc, here's an example from my life that I remember. Is that what you're talking about? Because see, we're all, have our experiences that orient us and guide us. And I said, no, that's not quite the same thing. Or yeah, that's exactly the same thing. Say, oh, okay, that's what you were talking about. Now it's clear. So kind of paraphrase back to me what you think you hear me saying, maybe with an example from your life, and then you'll get it to stick based on that brief conversation. Okay, so the political process sometimes yields interference, but it usually makes things worse. In California a few years ago, a majority of people went boop for lower insurance rates because they thought the insurance companies were just really evil in California and charging a lot for car insurance and earthquake insurance and other kinds of insurance. California is a dangerous place to live because of earthquakes and fires and floods and all of that, so a lot of insurance rates are pretty high. Whoops. A lot of insurance carriers left the state after that passed. Yeah, then try to get insurance for anything after that at any decent price, right? The supply line shifted to the left. There were huge shortages of some kinds of policies for a while, and then eventually, I'm not sure what happened to that ordinance, but I think things are sort of back to normal in California on that front, so I guess it was repealed or de-emphasized. But even then, a lot of the insurance companies had left the state, so the prices were still higher for quite a while until they had a chance to return under less regulated and controlled circumstances. Okay, so that's what suboptimal allocation of limited resources means. Again, creates a shortage, and then resources exit the market, right? Because that's another way for the sellers to make money. So the shortage gets worse over time. And here's a graph that you've seen several times, although I'm not sure if I've entitled it concrete each time. But this is the sort of the main event that's going on all around us for most markets most of the time. Because we live in a country where per capita income is pretty steadily increasing, an occasional hiccup like in 2009 where there was a big recession, but it's pretty steadily rising at 1 to 2 to 3% a year. And there's increasingly more of us. And I was just recalling from several decades ago, I guess, 1970, that the population of the United States in 1970 was almost exactly 200 million people. And what is it now? 320 million people. Okay, so it's gone up by more than 50% since then. So you see, the income per person is rising steadily, and so are the numbers of us. And that's true in most places for where things are a local market. So what's going on in most places most of the time is the demand is increasing, unless you're talking about something becoming obsolete, that something better has come along. And so demand increases steadily, which means the price needed to prevent shortages and increases steadily. So what happens? The profitability of the industry increases steadily until it increases enough for people to notice it, and then they enter that market. See, and that's the supply shift. Notice the S2 versus the S1. Okay? The demand increase is driving up the price. That drives market entry. That's the supply increase. So, as the blue letters at the top indicate, this is the main thing going on most of the time, surrounded by noise, and it's a starting point for ripple effects. Here's what I mean by ripple effects. Okay? Something happens and it affects things, and it affects other things, and it affects other things. What do I mean by noise? Well, this graph up here only has 2 of the shifters going on here. On the demand side, well, 3 of the shifters. On the demand side, there's the number of buyers, that's one of the shifters, and income. Okay, and on the seller's side, there's profitability that drives up the number of sellers. Okay, so what does noise mean? It means that there's a lot of other shifters. Okay, things can be happening to consumption substitutes and consumption complements, and can vary during times of the year if this is a seasonal good. Okay, so those are all things that are going on top of this to cause the price to vary, so that when we semi-consciously run down to buy something, we can count on it being there. Isn't that an amazing thing? That the vast majority of times when we go wherever, the convenience store or the grocery store or whatever, and maybe we go to a different grocery store than we're used to going, still no problem. There's going to be something there at the market price for you to buy. Somehow magically there's enough. That's because the price is free to fluctuate to work out these differences in quantity supplied and quantity demanded. At certain prices, the price changes to get them back into balancing it. Does that mean there are never shortages or surpluses of anything? No, it doesn't mean that at all. In fact, just the other day, my wife came home with 10 cases of organic bananas. I said, "Have you gone bananas?" "No." She said, no, our church got these left over from the store, organic bananas, like $1 a pound. It's like several $100s worth of bananas, but of course they are perishable. And so I suppose they charged a little bit too much for them that week, and they were going bad, and said, "Here, take them down to the church, give them away to the homeless," whatever. So anyway, so she did that. We kept a few of them ourselves. We have a freezer now full of frozen organic bananas. Yes, there are still occasionally surpluses and shortages. The price system isn't perfect, but it is awesome. It's an amazing process, as Hayek says in your chapter, Friedrich Hayek. It's a marvel. If somebody had invented the price system as a way to do things, 0 employees, right? No bureaucracy, based on freedom to efficiently allocate resources, he or she would at least have a Nobel Prize, if not sainthood and knighthood and a bunch of other things that people aspire to have. Okay, so anyway, here's the slide that explains what noise means and what ripple effects are. Okay. Anytime something happens in a significant way in one market, it ripples through gazillions of other markets, seamlessly without any commands, without any crises in most cases, prices adjust. Producers and consumers at the margin adjust. Most of us don't notice. The price changed by a couple pennies. Oh, well, whatever. But there always are people at the margin. That's an amazing thing, too, because most of us are not at the margin for most things most of the time. Think, how can it possibly make any difference to change the price of bananas from 49 cents a pound to 55 cents a pound? 6 cents. Come on, a pound? What's that, a dime a week if you eat a bunch of bananas? But it does make a difference. Somebody is at the margin, which means at 49 cents a pound, they buy more bananas than at 55 cents a pound. Okay? And at that same margin, someone down in the Banana Republic someplace, at the wholesale price that yields the 55 versus 49 cents, they're willing to ship more bananas than they otherwise would. Again, without any command, it's all voluntary, and it works better than any other system anybody's ever tried. All right, well, we'll conclude on this silly notion. I mean, imagine mass text messaging. No, I didn't say we're done. We've got 3 minutes left. You can leave anytime you want to. It's all voluntary, this and markets and other things. I notice when there's more grass, people pay more attention than when I'm trying to tell an interesting story on the devices. At your peril. Anyway, suppose you had a command economy and you noticed something changing, and you sent out a gazillion emails or text messages to try to get folks' attention and to get them to change their ways, but the actual prices they were getting were not different, and you're just pleading with them to behave differently. How much of a response do you think you'd get? Even if everybody opened their text and opened their email and read it and thought about it. Never mind, they get a gazillion of the messages. They're looking, is there any concrete, tangible incentive for me to behave differently as they're looking at this message? No, the prices I'm paying are the same. The prices I'm getting are the same. I'm too busy to bother with this. Now, by the way, can you think of anything that we actually do by this method? There's a good local example. Good local example. Huh? Where messages go out imploring you to use less. Huh? Yeah, water. Yeah, SAW, San Antonio water system. They don't change the prices. Okay, but every so often, if it hasn't rained a while, they send out these messages saying, conservation level such and such, please use less water, and send out the water cops to try to make you. Does it do much? It helps a little bit. Some people are public-minded about that, but it does a lot more if you just change the price. Well, that's politically incorrect to do that. So instead of sending out a correct price signal, namely that water is really, really scarce at some times, we beg and plead, and then we have to build more reservoirs that we wouldn't otherwise have to pay for out of our pockets, because the water demand is inflated by typically pretty low water prices still. Okay, last but not least, in our finding waning moments here. Remember that bankruptcy thing? What does that tell? That says the resources are more valuable in other uses. Well, in the Soviet Union, no one ever went bankrupt. Now the government would have to admit that it screwed up allocating resources. Didn't want to do that. How do you think that influenced the ability of the economy to grow if we kept resources locked into relatively low-value uses? I think that question answers it as itself. See you Thursday. Especially with the sound up there, it answers itself. Huh? Oh, it is up. You just checked? Okay. All right, test registration is ready to go. So make sure you do that and show up next Thursday, 9 days from today, on time with your student ID and all.